there were tons of resources for me, but there weren't any resources for my kids. And to be honest, I don't know that I ever would have gotten out of that marriage had it not been for the fact that that pain was affecting the way that I parented.
Welcome to the Eden Podcast, where we true the verse of Genesis 3:16, and we discover that God didn't curse Eve or Adam or limit woman in any way. Welcome to True Friends Friday. I'm Dr. Joy Fleming, co-founder of the Tru316 Foundation, which is the home of the Eden Podcast. Our website is Tru316.com. That's Tru316.com. I'm here for my husband Bruce today, and our co-host is Christy Fleming Goodham. She's been a joy around our family all her life. Christy, will you introduce our guest?
Yeah, I'd love to, Mom. Thanks. Jessica, welcome. We're happy to have you on our show today. And Jessica is from Arizona, the mother of 2 young kiddos, and the founder of Mosaic Motherhood, a community of warrior moms who are navigating co-parenting with a destructive individual. She's been building communities for over 20 years across all of North America in English and Spanish. And your world runs on coffee, Jesus, and spicy chocolate. And I wonder if it's in that order. Coffee, Jesus, and spicy chocolate.
Maybe or maybe not.
You're one of our very first Tru Partner donors of the Tru316 Foundation. You're known in our circles as the presenter of the Eden course on Genesis 2 and 3, which is a complete course that combines short videos, fun quizzes, and more for those who learn best using an online format. So thanks for all of your help with running those and doing those. You love focusing on ministering to solo moms in particular. You're a survivor yourself, a mother of 2, a trauma support specialist, and NLP master coach. Your passion is helping moms build community and empower their children to navigate their destructive family systems. Jess, I think that's really beautiful, and I'm excited to get to hear your story today.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Yeah, and I love your background, by the way. I love
Thank
the
you.
flowers. And yeah. So Jess, you did a short video, 3-4 minute video last year when we launched the Tru316 Foundation. We had our banquet and we used your video kind of as a testimonial of the impact of our ministry and kind of this theology and understanding of Genesis 2 and 3. And I just was like, oh my gosh, this is gold. Your video was inspiring to me as a fellow mama of 2 little ones. And I thought it was so relatable and it just like fired me up. So I'm excited to get to hear today from you again and learn more of your story.
Well, thanks so much for that compliment. Yeah, I love doing that video. I love supporting this ministry. It gives me all the feels. So,
Well, thank you, Jessica. And one of the first questions that we like to ask people is, what is your faith story? How did you come to know Christ and grow in Christ?
ooh, that's a bit of a long one. I would say that God had a hold of me before I knew him from a very young age. I did not grow up in the church. My family was, I guess, agnostic. We never really talked much about faith, and I grew up in a very small town. And so inevitably, I had friends who were Christians, and there was just something that didn't let me go. And I remember when I was super young, I mean, maybe 1st or 2nd grade, maybe a little bit older, I, on my own, decided that I was going to stop using negative words. And I had people hold me accountable. And there was something about that. I don't exactly remember what, but there was something about that related to God in there. And yet I didn't fully come to accept Christ into my life, I would say, until I was in college. And the funny part about that story was that there were just so many moments that God orchestrated, like a misturn on a way to a doctor's office that I ended up being incredibly late to because I locked myself out of my apartment, and ended up passing a church at the very moment when I happened to be looking for a church. And even at that point, yes, I had been evangelized. Yes, I had participated in youth group type things, but there wasn't really a strong commitment, except for the fact that it drew me. And I ended up coming to faith actually on a vacation to Arizona when I was living in San Diego. And I was hanging out with friends who, again, non-believers. And I just decided that for whatever reason, I had to find a church. That Sunday, I was the only one. I went by myself, and that was the moment. It was then. And it sort of evolved from there. I would say I got really on fire when I lived in the Caribbean for a couple of years, and I was part of a church plant there, which, believe it or not, I just got a message last night from one of the original ladies with me who was part of that founding group, and they're turning 17 this year. That kind of blew my mind. And it just was amazing to be part of this, feet on the ground in a different country, and just to watch that grow, to be able to work in all aspects of that ministry. And that just really fired me up. And I guess you could say the rest is history.
Beautiful story, Jessica. Amazing how God works so wonderfully, whether we're aware of it or not.
Yes, he does.
Well, we'd like to ask you a little about your ministry story. So, how did you come to use your spiritual gifts?
Well, I think that was also a bit of a process. I think that God used circumstances in my life. I like to say that sometimes I need to learn things the hard knock way. Like, he kind of has to take a frying pan to my head sometimes. But my story of surviving emotional abuse and domestic violence has sort of led me to a place of really, I almost want to say deconstructing my faith, but I don't love that word. I guess uncovering what was really beneath it. And Tru316 was an integral part of that, as I found it kind of coming out of the big COVID era, I think in the fall of 2021, and just relearning what God has to say to me and what the Bible has to say about me as his daughter. And in all of that, I knew that I needed to do something to support my family as a now single mom. And so I just started looking for ways that I could serve. And as I was coming out of that relationship, there were tons of resources for me, but there weren't any resources for my kids. And to be honest, I don't know that I ever would have gotten out of that marriage had it not been for the fact that that pain was affecting the way that I parented. And that was kind of the last piece of me to go, so to speak. And so I was not okay with it affecting my children, with it affecting the way that I related to my children. And there were no resources for me to help my children or for my children. And so while I was able to step out of that relationship, my children were not. And many children are not able to, because of the way the legal system works in this country. And that's not necessarily good or bad, but I firmly believe that there is a gap there. And so I have decided that after a bunch of research and a whole lot of training, that I want to fill that gap. And I want to empower moms to be able to give their children the skills that they need to navigate their destructive relationships, whether that's in family of origin, whether that's as they're growing up in, a two-parent household, or even in an intact family where there is a lot of emotional turmoil, and then of course carry that on into their life, because there are so many resources for us as adults, but that's after the trauma has already seeded. And so I aim to kind of cut that off and rebuild and rewire those kiddos' brains for the better.
What are some of the ways that you do that?
So I work a lot with emotional regulation. So I like to teach moms how to teach their children how to be able to regulate themselves in any circumstance. And I have a ton of techniques to do that. And then I also use my NLP training to be able to help both moms and their kiddos to visualize and create an emotional safe place for themselves and really be able to tap into what God has for them, what God says about them. And I pair verses with each and every technique that link in some way so that they're burying God's truth in their heart at the same time as they're learning to be able to combat whatever comes at them, whether that's at home or school. And then also helping their moms understand how to teach them how to speak up for themselves and when that is safe.
It's important to know the difference when it's safe and when it's not.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, well, this is wonderful work, Jessica. So we'd like to know a little more about your Tru316 story. How did you learn about the Tru316 message? And how was that important to you?
Well, again, I would say that God was working behind the scenes as he does. I was working for a colleague in a similar sort of work in the emotionally destructive relationship side. And I was helping her in the back end of her community. And I kept seeing post after post after post of, you have to check out this podcast. You have to check out this podcast. It's amazing. It's life-changing. And so I knew that if these women were talking about it, that it was something that I was going to enjoy. And I sort of put it off for a while because my brain tends to chase squirrels. And it was a very busy and somewhat chaotic time in my life at that point. But when I finally decided, okay, I'm going to start walking, I'm going to start listening to this podcast, I couldn't put it down. I had it in my ear until I had binged every single episode. I bought the book, I downloaded the PDF, bought it on Audible and Kindle all at the same time, and then ordered a copy because I was like, when can I get it? How can I get it faster? And then how can I mark it up? And then how can I share this with other people? And I think at that point is when I reached out to you and Bruce and said, how can I be involved? This has to be shared with as many people as possible. And for me, knowing that woman was not cursed, that man was not cursed, and the way that all of that played out in Genesis, in reality, the way that I had misunderstood that scripture was really foundational in me being able to feel good about being a woman again, frankly, about being a daughter of the Lord, because I could never quite reconcile how God could put that sort of pressure, if you will, on a woman and say that, oh, she's beneath the man or she's subordinate in some way, and then call us daughters and princesses and everything in the New Testament. And the moment that I heard the truth, it was like, oh, there he is. God is really the same yesterday, today, and forever. I see it now.
That's right. He loves us unconditionally. It's beautiful, isn't it?
It is.
Yes. And he doesn't tend to sound that way in Genesis 3, according to many of the translations, unfortunately. So the King James Version comes the closest to being accurate. So we are grateful for the King James in that regard. Well, it's wonderful to hear about how this was so helpful to you at that critical time in your life, Jessica. And that's what we pray for, that God will bring the people of his choosing to us to hear this message of God's amazing love for all of us, women and men alike. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
what this
And
is.
I've got a few follow-up questions too, if you're down
Sure,
for that,
Christy,
Jessica.
go for it.
Okay. So, all right. When you were like finally ready to start listening to the podcast, where did you start? Like, what was your first episode, and how did you choose that?
Episode 1.
You
went
just
all
went to
the way
episode
back
1.
to the beginning. Yeah, I think at that time there was maybe one season, and so it wasn't that cumbersome to go back to the beginning and listen.
Okay.
So yeah, I went back to the beginning and I just devoured the whole thing.
So what would you say to someone who's hearing this episode because they know you, or for some reason somebody was like, hey, check out this episode, but they haven't heard any of the others? Where would you tell them to start? Would you say go back to the beginning?
I think I would say go back to the beginning. And the reason that I would say that is because it's so necessary in this type of work to hear and see and experience the message over and over until it really sinks in. And so for me, I was super excited about it at the beginning, but it wasn't until I had listened to the podcast episodes and then read the book, which is essentially the same thing, and then completed the study guide myself and listened to the study guide episodes, and then started teaching the stuff when I was working on helping create the the Eden course. It wasn't really until then that I knew that if anyone ever asked me about this, that I could speak correctly, accurately, with eloquence on the subject. And so I really would encourage anyone to go back to the beginning, start in episode 1, and listen as necessary. The one thing that I love about this podcast is that the way that it's presented is so easy to understand and easy to follow. It's not, although there are definitely technical terms and there are definitely things that, the layperson like me has never heard before, it is easy to digest and it's easy to understand. So that would be my recommendation.
There's a lot packed in there in Genesis 2 and 3, isn't there?
There's so much. So much. And I mean, shameless plug, but I would also recommend anybody take the Eden course because it has all of that in there. You can have video, you can listen to the podcast episodes on audio, you can quiz your knowledge, you can go through the study guide. And so it's all just really neatly packaged as the foundational piece. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you had such an important part in developing that course. So we are grateful. Yes.
It was an absolute joy. I look back with so much fondness on the way that I was able to be mentored even by you and Bruce through that work, and just to be able to give back even a little bit in that way has been an incredible privilege.
Well, thank you, Jessica. And we are grateful that you were able to take the time today for us to talk with you and hear your story. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Tru316 Foundation is the home of the Eden podcast. Join us for $3.16 a month or more. Let's true the verses on the key passages on women and men. Go to tru316.com/partner.